Absolutely. So then, okay, so we're talking about mentors, but then how did you kind of navigate the networking, or was networking, is that something that you thought about consciously in college? Because I think college for me was big for three things. One is to be able to be accountable and be responsible. A lot of times, a lot of people, this is their first time off on their own, where they don't have their parents telling them what to do, waking them up, so you can get some type of accountability, or become more responsible in college. The second part, hopefully, if you do it right, you can get a skill, not a basket weaving degree. But the third thing is networking. I mean, obviously, we talk. Everybody who is a part of kind of my circle of people who I kind of really keep in contact with, these people who I met, whether it was engineering or law school. So these, and again, have kind of built my network. And as I'm not saying, as always, your net worth is your network. So
I was gonna say your own line on you,
yeah,
bro.
for sure. So how was that in college? Is that something that you really kind of thought about consciously? Because me going through it, I didn't think about the term networking, so to speak, but I always identified people who were doing something with their lives, whether their degree type or their degree path, or the other part was just had good character and somebody I wanted to really be associated with, and not some scumbag or somebody who's trying to just get over to get a dollar or whatever, but just really associating myself with people of good character, but also people who I thought, man, this guy's going to be somebody or do something. So is that something, how did you go about that in college, or is that something that you really just didn't think about at all as far as networking?
So for me, I've always been a people person, right?
Okay.
I think that I don't know very many talents that I have. You think about, a talent.
Yeah.
We were talking about college athletes and
Yeah.
XYZ.
Yeah.
I think that my strongest talent is to be put in any room in the country and be able to talk to somebody, right? And have a conversation and
That's
connect
great.
to people and understand what they're talking about, and have my points understood. So I've always been, I call it the gift of gab, right? That person who's going to go into a room and network a room and work a room.
Yeah.
Like I'll walk in there and shake everybody's hand and introduce myself to people that I otherwise have no business doing it. But it's intentional for me to want to make those connections. And
Right.
you never know how they can be returned. I,
Absolutely.
again, don't like, similar to mentorship, don't like forced networking, right? Where I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, after work, you got to go to this thing and make sure you get 5 business cards, because then it's going to turn into something. That's not that's
Yeah.
not real. I mean, it is
So,
in a way that you might get lucky, but you
yeah.
want to have, if I go to an event and have a
Yeah.
legitimate connection with 1 or 2 people, I'd rather do that than work a room and just try to collect business cards so I can
Yeah.
hit my number and go home. So for me, it's always been, like you said, try to find people that you think you actually relate to, with some character, or by speaking to them, you find out that you have a connection, and maybe you don't. And if that comes around later in the way of a business referral, or just a like a shared hobby, you never know.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always been, be intentional to speak with people, have yourself heard, and try to be in the right rooms.
Right. For sure. And
I
again, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so I'm not like I used to dread that too in law school. They're like, make sure you network, and it's like, that can be such a dirty word if you think about it as a task, right?
Yeah,
But
for
if you
sure.
go and you're like, hey, you're a person, go meet people that you have a reason to be in the same room with, whether that's through a association, through a cocktail mixer, black business XYZ. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's more important to be present and actually speak to people while you're there than it is to just go to go, right?
Right, for sure. I mean, and look, man, hey, you definitely dropping gems. And this is the whole point of this channel, to kind of talk about these things such as networking, such as mentorship, that maybe are more or less taboo subject, but how they can play a big role in your life. I think another thing that you talked about is just being relatable. I think that's a big part of it, as opposed to looking at this as a task to want to collect business cards and things like that. But just talking to somebody, being able to relate to people. Again, I'm a person who, I'm an introvert at heart. So when I do it, it kind of drains energy from me. But I understand that it's necessary, and it's always good to learn. For me, I'm a big person who I like to talk, especially talk to different people of different cultures. So I have people who are Middle Eastern that I'm friends with, obviously African American, Indian, Caucasian, whatever the case may be. That kind of enriches my experience. Just different, talking with different people of different backgrounds. I do have a quick story about that. I normally try to get out at least 2 to 3 times a week, go out, cigar lounge, whatever the case may be, network. This past week, it becomes more natural. I'm pretty sure you can attest to that it becomes more natural the more you do it. So I was going to the cigar lounge this past week, and I normally go to the bar just because it's the bar. You're going to be able to talk to more people as opposed to sending a table or whatever the case may be. I mean, I normally go by myself just because I kind of want to talk to people as opposed to just sitting there being on my phone, whatever the case may be. So the bar was full. So now they're leading me upstairs. This is a place I go to regularly. So they know my name. Hey, David, the bar is full, but hey, so I normally don't sit at tables because I want to talk to people. So whatever, I'm here now. So they kind of escort me upstairs, and it was a table that they escorted me to, but it was a table adjacent to that had just a person that looked like he was by himself. So I instantly hey man, are you sitting by yourself? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, cool if I sit with you. So we just started. We sat down talking, and again, we had a lot of different things that we can like relate to each other on, and telling them again, you can feel out. That's the other thing with kind of going out networking. You can feel people energy. I can feel if somebody's a sleazeball or if they are not for the right thing. And this genuine guy, and same thing, like, man, you're a cool guy. We ended up talking for like 30, 40 minutes. He bought me a cigar and a glass of wine, and we're talking and kind of telling about our different lives. And again, we just related to each other. And at one point I told him I have a podcast or whatever. And he had a buddy out in Los Angeles who I think he worked at the #1 advertisement company for podcasts. So he literally messaged him. He texts him like, hey man, this guy I got a good feeling about. He was talking about me to his guy. I got a good feeling about this guy, man. He seems genuine. He seems good. So he was like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's get my contact information. And then he emailed him also and kind of included me on that email. So just right there, just being
Man,
out.
you just never know. Yeah.
Just
the most random thing in the world.
And it can be
and you about
something
to have
that
ad revenue all through this thing.
Exactly. And just making the right connection. So it's just something that I also wanted to point out from a networking perspective. You just never know. So man, I think that's
also about being on, not being on your game all the time, but like you never know where you are, right? Like be aware of your surroundings, like be aware of how you carry yourself. You could be next to somebody who you never know. You get into one conversation or they see you acting a certain way, and however that conversation could have went, it's now going a totally different way. So I think that's a good note on being conscious of where you are, but also being open and available for conversation, because once you do, you just never know if it could be beneficial.